Hey there, Mike Robbins here. Hope you're doing well today. What's it, 12:45-ish Pacific time on Wednesday, the whatever today is, the 10th of November. I am here to talk about fear. Fear. Gosh. Whew, there's a lot of fear flying around these days. Have you noticed? It seems as though, over the past many months, year and a half, going on 2 years with the pandemic, but with so many different things going on in our world and with the business world and just society as a whole. And I mean, I know I've experienced quite a bit of fear personally over this last bit of time. There seems to be a lot of fear within our families, our teams, a lot of the teams that I work with. There's just a ton of fear and apprehension about all kinds of stuff. What's going to happen with COVID, and how does returning to the office work, and how are we going to work in this, hybrid kind of world, or what do things look like, or what's going to happen, or what's happening politically, socially, otherwise, just a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of weariness, I think, just from all these many months and, going on almost 2 years of living in this strange way, although things are opening up and changing and evolving, and, life is getting more back to normal-ish, whatever that means. And there's just a lot of fear in the world. But I want to talk a bit about, and if you're joining live, feel free to chime in on whatever platform you're on, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. If you're watching the video of this after, would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this. What are some things that cause you fear these days, or in general? How does your fear show up? How does it manifest itself? Because I think one of the things that I've learned over the years of looking at and talking about and studying and writing about fear and lots of different human emotions is, I think we have this notion of sort of positive and negative emotions, right? Positive emotions, joy, excitement, gratitude, love, appreciation, peacefulness, happiness. Um, Negative emotions, fear, anger, sadness, rage, jealousy, hurt. And look, clearly some emotions are different than others. They feel differently. They're more expansive or more constrictive. But my understanding, and I've written about this, I've spoken about this quite a bit over the years, is that emotions are positive when we actually feel them, authentically feel them, maybe appropriately express them, but just allow ourselves to experience the emotion. They're negative when we deny them, avoid them, suppress them. So, feelings of joy and love and excitement and appreciation can turn negative if we suppress them or deny them or avoid them, or just don't feel like it's safe or appropriate to feel them or express them. And feelings of sadness and anger and hurt and even fear can be really positive if we actually allow ourselves to feel them authentically and fully and deeply. Have you ever been really sad about something and allowed yourself to just get moved and to cry and to really tap into the sadness or the pain or the hurt and just really feel it? Now, it doesn't feel good necessarily, but if you go there and really go there, there's a catharsis. There's often a release that comes from that. And on the other side of it, more connection, more liberation, more perspective. So it can be quite positive. Have you ever been angry with someone and been willing to talk about it or bring something up and really work through it and get to the other side of it? And it's like, oh, I'm so glad we had that conversation. Or again, been scared, but embraced the fear, felt it, and then moved through it and allowed yourself to do something courageous. So it's interesting because I think we've been taught that fear is bad. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. It's weak. It's wrong. So we learn to avoid it or deny it. Or even if we start to become more emotionally intelligent, more emotionally aware, we also learn that, oh, fear is a negative emotion. It's we either make love choices or fear choices. But what we end up doing is like trying to psych ourselves out or talk ourselves out of fear, when in reality, it's a natural human emotion. And in fact, it can be really beneficial. It has saved our lives many times, being afraid. Now, we don't want to live in a constant state of paranoia, anxiety, fear. And by not facing it, not dealing with it, that actually makes that more likely. So, look, it's uncomfortable. It can be scary. It's not always encouraged. It's not seen as positive. But the more we can transform our relationship to fear, the better. I feel like I'm someone who's experienced and does experience quite a bit of fear in my life. And, that fear can sort of turn into kind of ongoing nagging anxiety. And look, if you have real anxiety that many of us are dealing with, especially these days, like there are places and professionals who you can go to get help and get support to really deal with like clinical anxiety is different than being, feeling anxious and sort of stressed out. So there's a difference. And it's hard to know what's normal, by the way, because we can only feel what we feel. I don't know what's going on inside your head, inside your heart, inside your body. I only know what's going on inside of mine. So I think the bigger problem we run into when it comes to fear is our avoidance of it, our denial of it, our suppression of it. I notice myself sometimes when I get scared about something as a father with our girls who are now teenagers, it'll sometimes manifest itself in me being critical or me being angry or me being irritable or even hostile because what's underneath it is I'm feeling scared. I've noticed this over the years in my relationship with Michelle, my wife, right? It's like, oh, I'm feeling scared about something. So sometimes that'll cause me to lash out or do something or say something that I ultimately regret. At work or with my business, it's like I'm feeling scared about something, a project, a client, the business in general. It might have me be extra controlling or anal about something or pushy or whatever. But if we can sort of notice what's underneath, what's driving the behavior, it's like, oh, I'm feeling scared. Okay. And there's that great book that Susan Jeffers wrote many years ago called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. We don't have to let fear stop us. We don't have to let fear knock us down, but it's also something to pay attention to. Maybe there's a reason why I'm feeling afraid or I'm feeling scared of something. Maybe I can get more curious and take a look at that. So we tend to avoid it, we judge it, we deny it, we suppress it. That's actually what tends to cause more problems and challenges for us than the actual fear itself. So, what are some things? Here are some specific things. I've talked about this on my podcast this week. I often have sort of a theme for the week that I talk about on the podcast and here on Social Live if I come live. So, what are some things that you and I can do that we can do as individuals? And what can we do ultimately with our teams, with our families, with the people that we work with and live with to have more freedom around our fear and to ultimately transform our fear? The first thing we can do is talk about it, just share. Be willing to open up and admit that I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling scared about something. And look, our words matter. Now, talking about fear is not the same as feeling it. Let me just be clear. I'm someone who talks a lot. I talk about a lot of things, but being able to talk about it is the first step to allowing us to acknowledge it and kind of get into that state of feeling it. But at least being able to admit it to ourselves and ultimately maybe to another person or other people. Usually we're not alone in the fear. So by talking about it, another person or the other people around or involved might be able to go, yeah, me too, or I feel that way too, or at the very least, just thanks for sharing that. But that can start to loosen some of the grip because it's often scarier in our head than it is when it comes out of our mouth, right? What did Shrek say in the Shrek movies? Better out than in. He was talking about that, of course, in a different context, but right, getting it out, being able to verbalize it, name it, often can sort of de-escalate the grip that it has. A second thing we can do is write it down or write about it, right? So write it in a journal. I've been carrying a journal around with me, sitting right over here on my desk, put it in my briefcase, although I'm not out and about as much as I normally would be in non-COVID times, but writing it down, sharing our thoughts, sharing our feelings, even writing it down just on a piece of paper, getting it out of our head. I mean, I guess we can type it. We're, typing and texting, but some way of getting it out, moving it through us. Sometimes that can feel safer. Maybe I don't want to talk to someone about it right away. Maybe I don't feel safe or comfortable or whatever. There's a bunch of reasons. Maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I don't want to wake somebody up. So can I write it down? Can I get it out of my head? That can start to move through it. Of the many things that I write in my journal, I was just writing in my journal this morning about some things I was feeling scared about. That can actually help us acknowledge it and sort of move through it. The next thing we can do is actually feel it, to really feel the fear. So talking about it is one thing, writing it down is another thing to get us in touch with it, but ultimately feeling it, really feeling it authentically. We don't have to walk around feeling, look, usually if you're walking around with a sense of anxiety or a sense of constant fear, usually when that's happening for me, I'm not really feeling it. I'm usually stuck in some fear story. As my counselor Eleanor likes to say to me, Mike, feel the fear, feel the feeling, drop the story. I'll say, I'm feeling scared because, and then Eleanor will often not disrespectfully, but just cut me off. Like, not that she doesn't care, but it's like, just allow yourself to feel, I'm feeling scared, full stop. And just sit there and allow yourself to feel scared. Really feel it. If you feel it intensely, it'll be like, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds. But if you really feel it, it'll sort of dissipate. You'll move through it if you really allow yourself to feel it. Now, related to feeling it, it's also important for us to own it, own our feelings, not blame them on others, right? Hey, Deirdre, nice to see you, right? To really feel whatever feeling we're feeling, our feelings are ours. They're not, look, certain situations and relationships or comments or stuff outside of us can instigate some feelings clearly. So we're influenced by the world. We're all sensitive, emotional creatures. But the reality is, you can't scare me. I mean, I guess if you jump out from behind a building or behind the wall and, I might have a jump scare, but ultimately the fear is inside of me. Something you do, something you say, some project I have, some deadline, some situation that may be going on. We get scared sometimes about our loved ones, our children, our spouse, our friends, the people that are closest to us, our coworkers. We get scared about goals or deadlines. I was talking to a group earlier this morning, and was working with some leaders on Zoom, and I was talking to them about some things they were feeling scared about, and they were scared about some of the big bets, some of the big goals that they have. They're excited, but not sure if they're going to accomplish them. So certain things can scare us, but ultimately our level of fear and how we experience it is about us. It's not the circumstances, it's us. Right? Certain situations might be sort of generally fear-inducing. You go jump out of an airplane or bungee jump or rock climbing or whatever, right? But ultimately the level of fear and the fear itself lives inside of us, not in the activity itself. Right? The metaphor of this that I've often talked about is the metaphor of the orange, right? It's like, if I had an orange in my hand and I squeezed it, what would come out of it? Juice. If I handed it to you and you squeezed it, what would come out of it? Juice. If you handed it to a friend of yours and they squeezed it, juice, right? If you threw it against the wall or stepped on it or squeezed it with your hand or put it in a juicer, it doesn't matter who squeezes it or how it gets squeezed. If you squeeze an orange, what comes out of the orange? Juice. Why? Because that's what's in the orange. It's not based on who squeezes it or how it's squeezed. It's just in there. What's inside of you and me, the juice inside of us, are our emotions. So life happens. We have a deadline. I feel some fear. Someone says something. My teenager is about to get their driver's license, whatever it is. I have a sales goal that I have to hit. I have a presentation next week in front of the senior leaders in the company. Like, those are the things that elicits that situation, that circumstance, that relationship, that dynamic might elicit a fear response in us. And, oh my gosh, I'm feeling afraid. But we've got to own the fear instead of blame it on the situation. Well, I got this presentation. What do you want from me? Well, I want you to be a human being. I want you to acknowledge, right? Speak your fear, write it down, feel it, acknowledge it, own it, be willing to face it. Because that's what's going to ultimately allow us to transform it, is by turning towards it, not running away from it, not blaming it on others or circumstances or situations, which we have a tendency to do. Here's a very specific technique that you can do. I'm actually about to do this later today because there's some things right now that I'm actually feeling quite scared about in my life. This is a great fear technique. So you take out a piece of paper. I use these little steno pads, these little notebooks, right? These things. And I have them for lists and different things that I make, but then write down the things you're afraid of. Maybe it's one thing, maybe it's a bunch of things, maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little, but just write it all down. And for me, usually when I write it down, it'll fill up one of these, sometimes more, sometimes less. It depends on, right? And then the way I learned this technique many years ago from a counselor I was working with is I would write it down 3 times. So like once, and then rip off the page, and then another one, rip off the page, and then another one. So 3 times, same stuff, but really to get in, feel the fear, write it down, really be real, be authentic about it. And one of the things about speaking about our fear, writing our fear down, even feeling it, owning it, even doing this technique, sometimes there's a concern that people have, which I understand. I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to throw gasoline on the fire. I don't want to get stuck in my fear. If you go into it intentionally wanting to really feel it and transform it, you won't get stuck. It's not the way emotions work. Avoiding it, denying it, talking ourselves out of it, trying to bypass around it, that's often how we can get stuck. So anyway, this technique, you write it down once, you write it down twice, you write it down 3 times. Now it takes a little time, so you got to have some time, but you really want to get yourself and get it all down, get it all out. And then once you have the 3 pieces of paper with the same things written on it 3 times, right? The three is about sort of reminding, it's something to do with our subconscious. It's something to do with kind of repetition, getting it in there. Then what you do ultimately is rip it up, rip up the pages, flush them down the toilet. So you rip them up, flush them down the toilet. Again, it's a physical representation of I am transforming this fear. I'm acknowledging it. I'm writing it down, right? Getting it out. I'm feeling it. I'm owning it. This is my fear. This isn't because of this person or this situation or that my boss or whatever. This is about me. This is what I'm feeling afraid of, right? Rip it up, flush it down the toilet. It's a physical representation, letting your subconscious know I'm releasing this, I'm transforming it. Then what I do is I'll either lay down in my bed or on the floor or sit or just, but get into a relaxed state, a meditative state. Close your eyes, breathe. And then I do a visualization. And maybe you like visualizations or you've done them a lot and they're easy for you, maybe not. But what I imagine is I kind of see it. Usually the way it shows up in my visualization is like some kind of dark energy around me, the fear, right? It could be like smoke or clouds or seaweed or something. Again, I'm just imagining this. And then I imagine it being lifted off of me, just sort of some magical force kind of lifting it off me and then going into a can, like a garbage can or a dumpster or something, and then being set on fire in the visualization, and then it being burned and transformed from dark to light. So the smoke may be dark, but then it turns into light. And in the lightness of it, in the transformation of it, then what I start to imagine is how do I want things to go in regards to these different situations, relationships, circumstances in my life that maybe I'm feeling afraid about. And that's the end of the visualization. It could take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It could take an hour, depending on how much time I have or how much is in there. But you know what I mean? So you write it all down 3 times, you rip it up, flush it down the toilet, do a visualization, imagine it being lifted off of you and transformed into positive energy, and then seeing what we want. That's one of the most important parts. If we acknowledge what we're afraid might happen or what we're afraid could go wrong, it's important to replace that with a more positive thought. Now, look, that's a little involved, and for some of us may seem a little weird, but you can do a different version of that. If you don't feel comfortable with the visualization, you can just close your eyes and think about it. You can talk out loud, you can write it down, but some way of facing the fear, acknowledging it, destroying it, and then creating what we want. Look, fear is part of life. Fear is part of being human. Fear is part of anything we want to do that's going to require a certain amount of courage or a certain amount of risk is probably going to bring about a certain amount of fear, some or maybe even a lot. We can't selectively mute our emotions. So if we say, I don't want to feel fear, I don't want to feel anger, I don't want to feel sadness, I don't want to feel jealousy, I don't want to feel rage, I don't want to feel whatever, fill in the blank, grief, then you're muting joy and love and appreciation and gratitude. And so the more we allow ourselves to really feel our fear, it gives us more access to our love, to our joy, to our passion. So the final thing that I would say that we can do, and this is definitely true if we're dealing with like a serious high level of anxiety or something more significant, which look is true for a lot of us these days, let's be honest. Even if we're just dealing with sort of day-to-day life and work kind of stress and fear and doubt, and ask for help. Reach out for help. The reality is the stuff that I get really scared about in my own life, even the big stuff, even the serious stuff, it's not as scary to other people. Not because they don't care or it's a diminishing thing, but the reality is if you come to me and share some of your deepest, darkest fears and doubts, I'm going to hear those with compassion. I'm going to understand to the degree that I can, but they're not going to emotionally trigger me in the same way maybe they are for you, because they're not my things, just like my things aren't yours. So one of the best techniques for us to manage our fear and help transform it is to reach out to the people around us who we trust, the people we work with, the people we live with, the people, maybe professionals that we work with, coaches and therapists and counselors, but people who can actually help us move through the fear and remind us that we're not alone and that we have support and that we'll figure this out. Oftentimes what paralyzes us in our fear is avoiding it, denying it, keeping it in our head, thinking there's something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you or me or any of us. Feeling fear is normal, just like every other emotion. And look, given everything we're going through right now and we've been through over the last 18, 19, 20 months, however long it's been, it's very understandable. So be kind and gentle with yourself. Remember We're in this thing together, this human thing. So I appreciate you joining live or watching the video this after. Again, drop a comment or a note or a question or a reflection or some thoughts about this, any ideas you have for future topics you want me to cover. I appreciate being connected with you here on whatever platform you're watching this on. And Serena, thank you. Mary, thank you. Nice to see you both, as well as you, Deirdre, and others. I'll be back again probably next week. I try to get on once a week with Social Lives, but it's sort of hit or miss. And I know we're getting into the holiday season. So be well, be kind to yourself and to others. Feel that fear and do it anyway.